So in the wake of the South Carolina primary, Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg have dropped out of the Democratic primaries. I cannot fathom why Tulsi Gabbard is still in the race. I mean, she hasn't got any chance of realistically winning. I don't know what her finances are like, but I can't comprehend why she's staying in. She consistently comes last. It just makes no sense to me. I mean, I was surprised when Buttigieg dropped out. And I read this morning that Klobuchar dropped out as well. With Buttigieg, perhaps he couldn't quite tap into the minority votes in a way that Biden has. Um, so that leaves Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Four left. What had started off with over uh, 20 candidates. So it's narrowed down. For me at this point, as an outsider, and I put that caveat, obviously I don't have a vote. And ultimately it's up to, I was going to say up to the American people, but up to Democratic, registered Democrats to determine this. And I know each state has slightly different arrangements for how they go about that. But I've said this before, when I comment on American politics, I do think it's legitimate for outsiders to comment, not interfere, but comment because the United States is the most powerful country in the world. So the potential future American president and the direction he or she will take is a critical question of our times. So for me, it has to be Biden, and this is why. Um, Looking at the four candidates, they all have sticking points and they all have merits. But as I identify with with centrism, I should say, it just has to be Biden. I think of the four, I don't know so much about Bloomberg, but certainly between Sanders, Warren, and Biden, I believe he has the strongest chance of beating Donald Trump. So I think the Democrats need to put their internal differences aside and see the bigger picture. You know, I've seen people comment on various candidates. For example, I saw people attacking Beto O'Rourke for endorsing Joe Biden. They were saying he's a sellout and so on. I'm not sure what the grounds for that is. They didn't specify. I think where a candidate has such a controversial sticking point that it could actually damage the party or even the country, that's a different matter. But when it's a relatively minor thing, I think they need to see the bigger picture because if you detest Donald Trump, you think he's a disaster, you think he's brought shame to his office, etc., then surely it's better to have your less preferred Democratic candidate, but who can beat him, rather than just being apathetic and saying, "Oh well, I didn't support that person, so to hell with it." Um, I mean, I personally think that Trump is such a contentious president in so many ways that my personal feeling is none of these four would be worse. I do have my concerns about Bernie Sanders, to a lesser extent Elizabeth Warren, but particularly those two. Bloomberg, increasingly I'm getting concerned about Bloomberg. I don't think he'll get the nomination, so I'm less concerned about him. I think it's possible that Sanders might. Warren's going to have to pick up some states, I think, to really get traction. She's still a heavyweight candidate, but I wonder has her campaign kind of reached any climax it's going to get. So here's the thing: I basically see Bernie Sanders as America's Jeremy Corbyn, although less radical. I don't think he has as much baggage. I don't think there's any examples of Sanders directly apologizing for terrorist groups the way Corbyn spoke about Hezbollah and the IRA being his friend. So I don't think there's really comparable examples. Also, Sanders has said that he would use military force if necessary. Corbyn stopped short of that. So Sanders isn't a pacifist. And his stance on Israel, I understand, is also more nuanced. Not that that's a major issue for me, but it's uh, put it this way: I don't think he's as radical to the left as Corbyn is. Nevertheless, he does tap into identity politics in a very profound way. So does Elizabeth Warren, and that's a side of the American left I really dislike. I think it's causes a lot more harm than good. Constantly pitching every single problem that people face as it must be about sexism, it must be about racism, the latter in particular. That's not to say that those problems don't exist, but when I look at Joe Biden, I don't think he is as divisive as a figure. Also, a lot of the things Sanders says you can have sympathy with. I mean, he is fundamentally right to say that it is a disgrace that in the world's biggest economy, millions of people do not have access to healthcare, which is a basic human right. A lot of Sanders' positions I wouldn't take issue with. For the same reason that a lot of the things Corbyn said were fundamentally based on decency and compassion. I'm talking about domestic politics here. But there is a point of delivery and reality. I do know as much about the American healthcare situation as perhaps I should, but the things that Sanders are proposing, if the end goal is universal healthcare, okay, but it's getting that message out and telling people that they need to give up insurance that they've already got. I do wonder how realistic that is, and I know that some of the more centrist, albeit more lightweight contenders, people like Tim Ryan and others attack Sanders for this. He says it's all accounted for. You know, that's always a question in a race. Is this paid for? Will it be accountable? Biden, of course, isn't without baggage himself. One issue with Biden, and for me, this is the main sticking point, is his track record of touchy-feely behavior, to put it bluntly. Now, in the Me Too era, that may not happen well in a general election. I don't think he's worse than Trump, but that may polarize women voters. Biden, from what I gather, does well with minority voters. I don't know how well he does with women. I haven't checked the statistics on that, but some of the footage is emerging. There's no question about it. The Republicans will use that against him. Now, the man himself has said that he will learn from this, and he apologized if he made anyone uncomfortable. Some of the footage that's out there, it's hard to really get around it. It's quite questionable. And is it bad judgment or is it something darker? Who knows? Who knows? But you know, when you're running for the most powerful office in the country, that sort of question is going to come up. Biden's age, is that a factor? He would be the oldest president ever by far, surpassing Trump by what, 7 years? Trump was, what was he, 70 when he got into office? I think Biden will be 78 in January next year. So 78 or 79. I mean, and to think that all the candidates here, all four candidates now left in the Democrat field are all septuagenarians. So, in a sense, that's not entirely a bad thing because it shows, if nothing else, at least ageism's not a factor. So, at least we're not at a point where you're saying, oh, you're too old to run for office. I actually believe as long as people have the energy for the demands of that job, as long as they have their full mental faculties, then I don't see the issue. If I think Sanders, but you know, Trump calls him Sleepy Joe, I don't see that. I think for a man of his age, he has boundless energy. In fact, I think all four do. Bloomberg actually, in some ways, to me, seems the most lethargic. He doesn't seem to have that energy drive that the others have, except for his vast wealth. Now, the thing about Bloomberg, mentioned this before, massive wealth in itself isn't necessarily disqualifying, but the fact that he is deliberately and not even trying to hide from the fact that he's using that raises questions that he's literally trying to buy the nomination. Now, Michael Bloomberg isn't just wealthy, he is staggeringly wealthy. I think he's one of the top 20 wealthiest people in the world. Never mind the United States, in the world. I think he currently ranks about 10th. So he has just a staggering amount of money. That is always going to raise questions. And that's not to say that he got it illegitimately or anything like that. Warren's on the attack because she says he has done questionable things as mayor. There's non-disclosure agreements, certainly in the wake of the Weinstein conviction. That isn't going to go down well. I think Bloomberg's going to have to directly answer to that. Another thing about Michael Bloomberg, some of the statements on China definitely raised some scrutiny. For example, he said that Xi Jinping gives the Chinese people what they want. He's accountable in that sense. Xi Jinping, one of the world's most notorious dictators. So that makes me think, would a President Bloomberg be just as pitching to dictators as President Trump is? Does make you wonder. So when I weigh everything up, when I look at Warren and Sanders, I think they tap into a lot of commendable policy positions in terms of compassion for the most vulnerable in society. I don't think they could be faulted for that. And I do think that is absolutely necessary for a Democratic candidate. And by the way, all four candidates I commend on the gun issue. Michael Bloomberg's been very strong on that. He chaired the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. That's something that's a prerequisite for a Democratic candidate. And in my view, they're on the right side of history with that. So all four, I'm happy with their records there. If I was an American, I'm not. But if I was, that would be a major, major voting thing for me. Um, but when I weigh all of this up, I think in a general election, the only way, I mean, Hillary was portrayed as being a socialist, as being the Red Queen, etc., which in my opinion was nonsense. She was pretty centrist. Some would even say, she was a archetypal neocon capitalist. But that's the thing with the American culture wars. It's got so tribalized that anyone that's even slightly to the left is now a raving communist, and anyone that's even slightly to the right is a fascist. So people who are on the center, um, they're going to get pigeonholed anyway. But I do think that, I mean, it's not that we can make an exact comparison between the United Kingdom and the United States. There are different politics at play, and the actual voting structure and so on is different. But Jeremy Corbyn pulled Labour well to the left. It backfired badly, and his party lost badly in the last general election. If Sanders or Warren pull the Democrats even more to the left. Also, I would say I mentioned that Sanders hasn't got any ties to terrorist organisations, but there are some people that support him. Linda Sarsour, for example, who's an unapologetic Islamist, and she is. I don't know how anyone could rationally say otherwise. That are attracted to his candidacy. That raises questions. Um, Sanders has not named Islamism. He has not recognised the ideology. I do raise questions about that. Although to be fair, neither did Obama. Those are things that people might say are trivial, but it taps into the way someone thinks. Now, Joe Biden is a centrist, okay? Um, he will pitch to the left in a lot of areas that are sacred to Democrats, the gun issue, healthcare, and so on. But he is also, I think, the adult in the room when it comes to realpolitik. He doesn't have the billions that Bloomberg does, so he isn't sort of smeared with that sort of dirty billions thing. I think, is he a perfect candidate? Far from it, but he's definitely he can connect with people. He has that folksy mannerism, which I don't think can be underestimated in American politics. It worked for George W. Bush. It worked for Bill Clinton. That sort of folksy guy next door, guy you can have a drink with. I think Biden very much has that, and I think that is a vote winner. I think with Sanders and to a lesser extent Warren, they're immensely popular with their base in a similar way that Trump is with his base. But I honestly think that the only way to beat Donald Trump is for a centrist to understand that they need to win the heartlands, they need to win the Midwest. But for me, it has to be Biden. I personally want to see Trump out of office. It's not because I don't have my critique of the Democratic Party. I deeply dislike their pandering to identity politics. But I feel so baffled that this appalling man has a chance of winning re-election. I think he has been the worst president in my lifetime by far. It's not to say everything he has done is bad, but Trump treats world politics like a game. He treats diplomacy like, I was going to say like business, not even like that. This is a president who conducts diplomacy via Twitter. I mean, that says it all. I can go on all day about my contentions with Donald Trump, but that is what it is. I hope he is a one-term president. And if he's not, if he wins re-election, it will be because the Democrats had too much infighting and because they had the wrong candidate. I mean, the thing is, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. That's something that shouldn't be forgotten. Hillary Clinton, more Americans voted for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. So in that sense, she didn't lose, but because of the electoral college system, she lost. So it's all very well winning California and New York, but I think the Democrats need to really understand the importance of the heartland because of the way the electoral college system works. And I think maybe the Clinton campaign didn't. She never quite got over that East Coast metropolitan elite image. Um, anyway, that's just my thoughts. Obviously, it's not up to me. I'm not telling anyone what to think. I am an outsider. But like I say, the future of the United States matters. So I'll be watching this race very closely.